All right, everybody, welcome to the cognitive development theory presentation. Today we're covering two different theories, cognitive development theory and sociocultural theory. So, we're going to begin with cognitive development, and we're going to be talking about a fellow named Piaget. So, I'm going to full screen this. So, we're talking about Piaget's theory of cognitive development. And what this theory is all about is development over learning. Later on, I'm going to give you guys an example of a student in a math class. And we're going to be talking about answers on a test, the process of how we got those answers. So, look forward to that. It's going to be a lot of fun. Couple things to keep in mind for this presentation. We're going to go over to these two bullet points here. So his theory focuses on children. It's not about adults. He's only concerned with children. And he describes his work as genetic epistemology. So he cares about where things come from and the framework of those things. So I've broken this down into two different sections here. I've got some definitions here over on the right of key terms, and then I've got our 4 stages of cognitive development. First, I want to break down those terms to give you guys a little bit of context into the stages when we operationalize all of this fun stuff. We're going to be coming up with fun metaphors. I want to make this relatable to you guys so you enjoy the experience. That's what learning is all about. If you guys don't enjoy this and have fun connecting, then you're not going to retain any of it. So we're going into schemas, talking about retention and connecting everything. Think of schemas as the building blocks for thought, for subjects, for everything. So the way I like to think of schemas, I like to think of them as a road. So I'm looking outside right now. I've got a road just in front of me here beyond my window. Let's call that road cognitive development. So that's my cognitive development road. As you go further down the road, you've got your sociocultural road, and those two things intersect. So each road is a schema, and you've got millions upon hundreds of billions upon billions of schemas built into your head, most of which you're not really conscious of, but they're in there. So let's say you're walking down the street and someone comes up to you and says something, a stranger. Now, in your mind, you have a schema of how to deal with strangers on the sidewalk. You're not really sure it's there, but automatically you kind of go into it. Well, I don't know this person, but I want to seem friendly. That's still a schema. So keep that in mind. So then we move into equilibrium. Equilibrium is just your brain's way of making sense of everything around it. So if you're in an environment where everything makes sense, Piaget would say you're in a state of equilibrium, your brain is. The teacher's role is kind of breaking down that equilibrium. Because if you're constantly in a state where everything makes sense and you're a child, you're not learning anything. Because I don't know many children that are 5 years old that don't have any questions, that know everything about the entire world. I haven't ran into that child before. I'm sure they've made a movie on one. Maybe I'm thinking of like The Sixth Sense or something like that. But in real life, that child does not exist. So our last two are assimilation and accommodation, and they are connected to each other. So assimilation is your mind. So we've got those two roads. So let's say you're on one road, you know that road really well, you're getting to the new road, it's new, you don't know it very well, but you think you have an idea of what it is because of this other road that connects to it. You're kind of familiar with it. That's assimilation. You're using one previous concept that you know to make sense of the new one you're not familiar with. So in the book, they give a really funny example. They give an example of a child pointing at an older man, and the older man doesn't have very much hair. He's got kind of a cul-de-sac going, whereas there's no hair in the middle, but you've got the hair around. And automatically the kid's going, "Oh man, I know that haircut. That's a haircut of a clown." So the kid, not even thinking about it, goes, "Mom, look, a clown, a clown." So then the mom's going, "Oh God, this kid just embarrassed me again." So that bleeds into accommodation. Accommodation is the correction of that faulty, assimilative, if you will, behavior. So the kid mistakenly confuses an older man for a clown, which was not correct. Accommodation is that correction of the bad assimilation. So pretty simple to think about it in those terms. Moving on, we got to talk about those 4 stages. So we've got 4 of them. Unfortunately, I've only got 15 minutes, so I kind of got to breeze through some of these. But we've got 4. We've got sensory motor stage, pre-operational, concrete operational, and then formal operational. So sensory motors from your birth to your 2 years, that's all about object permanence. So think about this pen. If I have a little 2-year-old sitting next to me, showing the pen to the 2-year-old, "Hey little guy, I got the pen here." If I go ahead and put the pen down away from him, object permanence is him or her or they still being able to make sure that that pen exists. That's what object permanence is. Pre-operational. Pre-operational is being able to think about things non-literally. So concepts. Think of the pen as a concept of something. Yes, it's literally a pen, but the pen can represent knowledge. It can represent freedom. That's what the pen is about, which is kind of what metaphors are about. So maybe being able to think about things metaphorically, you could say, works for pre-operational. And that bleeds into concrete operational. Concrete operational is ages 7 through 11. And there's 2 different items to unpack here. The first is being able to think about things in your head as opposed to act them out physically. So think about like motor skills, throwing a baseball. The child, instead of having to, go out and throw a baseball every single day, can say, "Hey, maybe I'll put my fingers on the seams this way and I'll start throwing that curveball." That's part of concrete operational. And then the other thing to unpack is conservation. So conservation is the idea of understanding that although things may change visually, they're still the same in quantity. So I use the example of a cup of water. You're pouring a cup of water into a smaller glass and it raises the level. It looks like you have more water. That whole idea is being able to say, no, the amount of water is still the same. It's just a smaller glass, so it looks like there's more. That's conservation. Being able to recognize that. The last one's formal operational. Formal operational is just being able to think about abstract concepts and come up with hypotheses for those concepts. So I think about, what's the meaning of life? Why are we all here? Why do I enjoy rubbing my feet at night? Those type of things. What you're just thinking about those random things and you're considering the implications of them. That's the last stage. That's the stage we're currently in, according to Piaget. So I'm still trying to figure out why I like rubbing my feet at night. So what does this all mean? So with Piaget, he's concerned about the teacher as a facilitator. The emphasis is on the process. He doesn't want the kid just listening to the teacher and memorizing everything. So the example I want to end it with is the math. If Piaget is your teacher, you give your test to him, you've got all the right answers, but you didn't show any of your work. Piaget says, "Look, man, you got an F. You didn't show me any of your process. I don't know what you did." I don't care about the final product, just the answer. I want to know the meat and bones. That's Piaget in a nutshell. Okay? So the next thing we're going to talk about sociocultural theory, otherwise known as zone of proximal development. Now, the best way to understand sociocultural theory is it's sort of like peer assistance theory. Like, you learn better when you have the help of someone around you, specifically a classmate or a peer. So it deals with Lev Vygotsky. So Lev Vygotsky was a big advocator of matching students with more skillful peers to help them develop, rather than using, the teacher to come over every single time a student needs help, which isn't practical if you have 30 kids. Why not pair that student with a student who's a little more advanced to help them along? So by placing his student in the shared space zone with a more precocious student, they're able to get that little boost. So we're going to be talking about that little boost today with sociocultural. So let's define zone of proximal development. So zone of proximal development, an area where a student can further determine and hone their knowledge. So exactly what we just talked about. Let's think about a third grade classroom. We're talking about fractions. One kid, teacher knows is really good. This guy, he could be working for IBM one day. We have another student who's not quite as advanced. Teacher goes, aha, I'm going to pair IBM with this other kid, and we're going to bring them both into that IBM level of math satisfaction. That's the zone. They kind of define it more so as the gap between the two, and that's the zone of proximal development, where you have the advanced and the not as advanced, and then in the middle is that zone. I like thinking about it the other way because I think it's a little more clear. Scaffolding is another massive concept. Scaffolding is just that boost. It was not actually introduced by Vygotsky. He called it something different. It was introduced by Wood. Wood started calling the scaffolding, and that's the boost. So they use a tennis example in the book, which I really liked, which was Maria playing tennis. This is my example. Let's say Maria's really good at tennis. She wants to get better. She doesn't know how to get better. And then all of a sudden, Roger Federer comes along. Our more advanced person gives that person a little boost. Sure enough, Maria's got it going on now. Okay? Then we have 3 more terms. We've got cultural tools, line of natural regression, and the dollhouse example. We've also got reciprocal teaching, so 4 more. I'm going to try and get through these. I've literally got 2 minutes left. Cultural tools. So these are just what students have access to, like YouTube or internet for kids nowadays. You've got so many more tools nowadays and so much more information, but it's a little more cloudy. So it's arguably harder to find those really good sources. That's why studying history is so important, because you learn to emphasize primary documents. Line of natural regression. So this is the difference of attainment when you get that little boost. So before you got the boost, you were here. After you got the boost, you're there. And you're a little bit more comfortable after you get the boost to do it on your own the next time. That's sort of the natural regression line. The dollhouse example, this is one of my favorite parts. I love the dollhouse example because they literally paired one student by himself and another student with his mom. And not my favorite study, but of course the student with his mom performed better. And this was sort of them pitting discovery learning against the proximal zone of understanding. Reciprocal teaching is basically just de-emphasizing the role of the teacher over time. So what does this all mean? According to Vygotsky, the role of the teacher is to mediate interaction between the students. I've got 20 seconds. This theory feeds directly into collaborative learning, which is the very same thing. Please pause this and read it because I'm literally out of time. Thank you so much for coming to this presentation, and I will talk to you guys later. Thank you.